All right. Well, we're live here today at IdeaCon 2016. My name is Blake Hogan, and I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center. And I am here today with an esteemed panel here. I'll start on the end here. We've got Jason Denenberg, who is with Launch Tennessee, Director of Capital Formation here. Brad Edmondson, I've been an entrepreneur for over 30 years and is the founder of VentureWise. Did I get that right? Did I just pronounce? Oh, NourishWise. Yes, sorry, we screwed that up. And Dr. David First. Dr. David First has been an entrepreneur, a teacher, a strategist, and consultant. And our guest of honor today, Heather Queen McBee and Miss Millie. So Millie is our resident therapist dog at the Entrepreneur Center. So entrepreneurship can be a little bit difficult, and we all need somebody to speak to at times. And dogs are some of the best listeners. So Heather McBee, please take it away and tell us a little bit about Miss Millie and how she became an entrepreneur. Today's panel will be talking about innovation and entrepreneurship and some of the first steps we take. So let's have Millie, through Heather, answer our first question of how does one begin?
How does one begin? So, well, Millie began just by making a lot of racket and being disruptive at home and needing to get out of the house so that her emotional support human did not get kicked out of her home. So now Millie goes to the Entrepreneur Center with me each day, hangs out in my bag, and has her own email set up so that our entrepreneurs going through our programs can request quality time with her. But it is a nonprofit venture for her, so.
And so in her email, if people want to send her a note?
Yes, it's millie.mcqueen@gmail.com.
All right, so that's millie.mcqueen@gmail.com. So if you've got any questions or you're having a tough time throughout the journey, she will be there to answer all of your questions. So one of the questions we've got is why is it that most ideas and products never actually become a viable business? So we'll start with Dr. First. So Dr. First is a professor at Michigan State and at Vanderbilt. Has now gone on to consult and also has been a founder of two very successful companies, among others. So if you would kick us off here on why some of these ideas never become viable businesses.
Okay, the simple answer is because they shouldn't. Okay, most ideas shouldn't become a business, and one of the reasons why you come to the Entrepreneur Center is to have somebody talk to you and say, does that even sound like a business, something you ought to be doing? But the idea that fundamentally the notion when I'm looking at an entrepreneur, the first thing, if they don't have this, it's like, we're done, get out of the room. They've got to really understand the space they're going into, and they got to be passionate about solving that problem. Now, you can come in with too much passion. You got to be knowledgeable about it. You got to be able to tell me about that. If you can do that, that's a start. And then you got to build a business around that. The purpose of a mentor is not to help you make your idea any better or to tell you what problems you ought to solve. The purpose of a mentor is to tell you how to build a business around that idea and what you're going to do next.
I would add to that. Once you do have an idea that should be potentially a business, then you need to surround yourselves with the right type of people. Tennessee, I think, is leading the country relative to the amount that the state has gotten involved in the Entrepreneur Center and the different entrepreneur centers we have across the state. And that's happening all across the country now. So there are good places where there are mentors that can help you through that process, and then also to help gather people around your concept and help you take that from what it is today to what it can be in the future.
So Jason, I might know your answer, but go ahead if you would.
Yeah, Dr. First mentioned passion, and it's surprising to me at times to watch people working on an idea, and it's hard to tell at some points whether they're just trying to take advantage of a potential arbitrage opportunity or whether they truly have passion for what they're doing, because it typically takes twice as long to get to the next level and twice as much money. So if you're not ready to be in it for the long haul, you're not going to get your idea to the next level, and it's really important to think about that passion component to what you're doing and what you're working on.
Yeah, and so Heather, I'm going to ask you that question as well, but just to give a little context, so Heather's our VP of Accelerator Programming at the Entrepreneur Center, and they run a couple of different accelerators around industry-specific opportunities, publishing, music technology, and now healthcare. So you are quite literally in the trenches with some of these companies, and you see some that make that pivot and end up successful. So I'd like to hear a little bit about maybe why you think some of those don't go, and then about the few companies that really make that great turn and finish strong. What separates them from the others?
It's along the lines of what Brad and Jason and Dr. First have said, but it ultimately comes down to the entrepreneur. It can be the best idea in the world, but if the entrepreneur can't deliver it, there is no idea. That's the meat of all of it. That's what sets apart those that succeed and those that fail. And then not only the entrepreneur and their passion, but are they willing to fail and learn from that failure, and are they willing and able to succeed, and are they coachable and resilient? That's the difference.
All right. Well, so once you've got an idea built and you started to get a little bit of traction, and you're trying to move through the different elements, you've got an MVP. So most of the folks in the audience here have a business of some sort. They've started to get a little bit of traction. And we've talked in the venture community, we talked about the venture valley of death. But what are some of those obstacles that you see that keep people going from the gentleman here that had the washing machine, and then he went to the prototype, and now he's going to go to that third iteration? So as they're moving through those iterations, what do you see as some of those really challenging elements that keep folks from getting from that one stage to the next and be able to continually progress?
Who do you want to start with, me?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. So let's see. Ladies first.
Ladies first.
Millie?
Millie would say coachability. That's the number one thing. If you're not going to listen to what the mentors, the people around you that you've surrounded yourself with or that you come into contact with, if you're not going to listen to what they have to say, figure out how that applies to the business that you're trying to build, that's what makes the difference.
Basically, when someone comes in and asks me, well, the wrong question is, well, what should I do about this? And I said, first of all, I probably have lots of answers, but they're not your answer. So I should not be answering that for you. Go figure it out. A lot of what we try to do is think about how do we give you frameworks. For the framework for that question is not how do you go from here to there and here to there fast as you can pay for it and you can develop it and learn it. The key is, as you think about an entrepreneurial startup, there are definite phases it goes in. And one of them is called, and we talk about the MVP. When you have an MVP, you're in the proof of concept stage. Will it work? Will the dogs eat it? Do they want it? Can I build it? What's the next thing to go to from here? Once you've done proof, and that's a while, you may go through several sort of MVPs or iterations of that, so that's proving the concept will work. Next is you got to grow the business, and this is where you begin to build the business around the idea and really make it grow. That's why when people come in early on and say, here's my business plan, I say, just put it back in your pocket, just talk to me about what you're doing and why you're doing it and how that works. But you think about the phases, it's proof of concept, then you prove you can grow it, which means you're still going to change it, develop it, modify the business around it. And then finally, if you're going to be really successful, you got to be able to scale it, which just means grow really fast. And the difference between proof of concept and growth is an even larger difference between growth and scaling. You've really got to figure out where's the sweet spot of this business that I can then build on and do over and over and over again. But those are the things. If you're going to make it through, those are the three things you've got to do.
I would also say from the pitches I heard this morning, you have to really understand who your consumer is. So there was a couple that were direct to consumer. There was one that was a business to business, software as a service. So you have to really understand who your customer is. Like, are they going to, you're going to eat your own dog food? Is there demand for what you're trying to do? And then once you've identified that and you've had that validated by people around you, you really need to have people who can understand how you can get penetration in that. If it's a direct to consumer, I mean, it's tough, but the individual with the healthcare application, you need to surround yourself with people who understand, who have customer base that can get you in. I think he had a pretty good entrance with some consultants inside organizations. So you have to really understand where those consumers are, who's going to buy your product, and then how you surround yourselves with people that can help you get there.
And just to add
Please.
to this, one of the most frustrating things as a mentor and somebody working with entrepreneurs every day is not having those customer conversations. It's like, if I came up with a dog food and she liked it, that's great. Now I need to go find 30 other dogs and make sure they like it as well. That customer validation when you're doing your proof of concept is so important. And it's very frustrating to have somebody come in with a business plan and everything laid out, and maybe even if it's a device or something physical that they've got it built. It's like, well, does anybody actually want it? Where is the proof of concept?
Yeah, so
Before you talk about scaling, you got to talk about the idea of who really wants this thing and how does it work. If I were going to say that there's one thing that causes early stage entrepreneurs to fail, it's not so much running out of money, it's not really understanding your business. But if you do that, it's where you get out of sync in the MVP and finding what the customer demand and what do people really want. The idea is when you try to make decisions, so when someone comes and says, well, tell me, here's how I'm going to scale my business. I said, you don't even have a business. So that's the wrong question you're going to put. Not only, I said, think about it all you want. Don't spend any money on that. It's what you spend the money on is the things with the stage where you are.
It was my fault.
I might just add, the step going from getting initial traction and getting to the next phase sometimes can really be distraction. And knowing what to work on and what impact it has to your specific company or business model. And, they've each kind of touched on that in different ways. And, having mentors around you to help guide you and help you really pinpoint what you should be focused on, whether that be metric-wise or whether it's, the value proposition to the customer, and building that community around you, because it can be a very, very lonely path to walk down. So having people around you that can really help guide you on what to not focus on is just as important as what to focus on. So I'd think about the very core metrics for your company, and you're going to have a lot, but Brad Feld has a really good post on 3 core metrics is typically the nucleus of what you need to know. If you were on a desert island and you can only get 3 metrics to understand the health of your company, what would they be? Again, you're going to have 10, 12, 15, who knows, but there's usually 3, 4, or 5 that are really mission critical to know.
yeah, and so to the point about customer validation, I think a lot of times folks can overthink it. Like you said, come in, I've got everything all flushed out. You say, well, how many people have you spoken to? And how many people have said, yes, I'm interested? And how many people have actually purchased the product? And a lot of times entrepreneurs think, oh, gosh, I'm just not ready yet. The product's not there yet. The website's not there yet. If you would maybe give a little bit of advice about how to go about doing customer validation, maybe a little bit more smart, and then also how that can actually play into your strategy. And so folks don't, I'm not quite there yet. So go out and execute and customer validation. So we'll start with David and Brad, because you both have built businesses and scaled businesses. So how do you, one, get over the overthinking process of it and just go out and start doing it, and then also do it in a way that's smart?
I mean, that's a tough question. It really is. I think it depends on, if it's a direct consumer, there's a whole set of, things that you need to do and validate, and there's still a lot of, I would say debate on how to go about doing that as far as A/B testing and those types of things. If it's, if it's a business to business or a software as a service, that changes the dynamics there dramatically on how you would go in. You would find that and validate that out. I think those situations are a little bit much easier because you've got a business who's functioning, it's making money, it has a widget, it's producing, if you're either improving their process or you're helping them down their path, then it's a lot easier to get the validation that you need in order to maintain and to stay on track. Sometimes when you gather a bunch of consumers around and go, you like this app? I don't like the color, I don't like this. I mean, you can get a lot of useless and just a lot of white noise with in consumers. But if it's a product, if it's software as a service or something that you're selling to a business, it's a little bit more easy, because then you can really help. You can gauge and get direct feedback as to whether your product is helping improve their process or it's not.
Yeah, even before you build the product, there's the notion I've got to build the product and put it out there before then I can validate it and people can know, and that's wrong. It's just wrong, because you're going to build it and half of it's wrong, and now you built the whole damn thing, and so how am I going to undo half of that and do something else? So there are things you can do. And so think about, at the base of what you're doing before you build anything, you're committed to building a customer experience, which is around them using your product to solve their problem, what they wanted to do. You can describe that. And so one of the advantages of being a college professor for 40 years, in addition to being other stuff, and teaching entrepreneurship classes is, of course, they're in there and they got these raw ideas and nothing. So how do they test it? And we've developed a little exercise. We use it as homework. It's called the customer experience exercise. So I said, tell me in 10 words, what's the name of the experience you're committed to deliver? You're able to do this better than, okay? And then you're going to answer 3 questions for me, and you got to get this all on one page. Give me a paragraph. The first paragraph, what can the customer do with your product they couldn't do before? Second is, how does doing that make them feel? The third one is, what does that show other people about what kind of person they are and whether they should be esteemed or not? Those are the three. Now, once you've described that, you can actually take that out and do a concept test and say, look, I'm thinking about starting this business. Take a look at this. Tell me what about this appeals to you and not. So this becomes the platform way before you build the product, has a huge amount, so you've validated the idea of being in this space and that people really want that. You can do that way before you build a product.
And the difference of doing that validation through interviews and conversations versus a survey that you post on a Facebook page. The conversations are the way to go.
Yeah, and to that, maybe just kind of tactically how to have some of those conversations without asking for the answer that you want to receive. So part of it is being open and vulnerable enough to say, maybe this isn't a great idea. So maybe if you have a couple of examples on how you can actually go out and do that, and one, not just do surveys, but also then ask folks that are outside of your sphere of influence. So just kind of tactically, how are you asking those questions so you don't say, get the answer that you want people to give you.
It's not a skill set that I have, so one of you have to answer it.
You can always go with like, my friend's working on a startup that's doing X. What do you think about it? And put it on somebody else's shoulders.
Yeah, this is for my friend.
This is for my friend.
Yeah, and what I meant is my skill set is not in asking a question that I don't get the answer that I want. So that's what I meant
Okay.
personally.
My friend is developing an itch cream.
Right. No, but it's tough, and no matter what stage you're at, I would encourage you to just, push yourself. Starting tomorrow, can you find 10 people per day for the next 7 days to talk about your idea? I know it's scary, it's intimidating, but the response you'll get, I would wager, will be so much more positive than you would anticipate. And you do it a couple of times, and you get a familiarity on how to do it, and you get better at asking the tactical questions. You're going to hear yourself sound really silly and really misstate some things, but the recipient doesn't know that. They have no idea what you're talking about, so they don't know whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah, let me add that's a great notion. Let me add an element to that. So the notion of concept testing is when you got the idea of what you want to do, but if your question, which is how do you talk to people and not kind of let them know what you're about so they can say, oh, honey, that sounds great. So the idea is, well, you can go up and ask people, do they have this problem? How do you solve this problem? Well, I don't have that problem. Well, that's great. It's been great talking to you. Move on. So how do you solve this problem? And they'll tell you. And so you just have a conversation about how they solve that problem. Okay? And you can say, well, what do you think about that? How do you like that? What part of that's not working for you? Okay? And then out of that conversation, you may say, well, I'm thinking about doing this, or here's another idea. Does that sound like that gets anywhere close? Oh, that sounds great. Tell me more about that. And so don't be in the selling mode, being in the listening mode, but you can open it up without doing that. You certainly can do that. That's the way you do that kind of interview.
I think a lot of people are afraid to get an answer they don't want to hear. And so they go out and they overtly try to convince the person, isn't this idea great? Well, I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to have an idea a day, right? So don't be afraid to go out and just ask and get negative feedback and go, well, it's a dumb idea, and move on to the next. Because as an entrepreneur, you're just kind of built to have ideas every day. And you're also, I guess you're kind of a wide-eyed optimist and always to think that your idea is going to succeed. But, I think Kevin earlier today said, if I have an idea, I want it to die fast and to die, less expensively. And so I think as an entrepreneur, you want to go out there, vet it. If it doesn't work, great. You're going to have a different idea tomorrow that you can take out. Sooner or later, you hit on one.
Yeah, and so to that point, when you've gone out and you asked those questions and now you've gotten the feedback and you're starting to make that go, no-go decision, do I move forward? What is your advice? So, and I'll start with you, Brad, on this one, having built a couple of different businesses. When you're making that decision, what do you base that decision upon? And then also, how do you then decide, I think I'm not going to move forward with it, when these products that people have created have become very personal and they become their baby and they become things they're very passionate about, and having the, whether it's the guts or humility or whatever it might be, to be able to go, all right, this is not the right product or service at this time. So
I think it gets easier the older you get, whether, to pursue something or not, because you got to have the energy, to put in the 80-hour week or you don't. But that's a great question. I think everybody, individually has it. I think for me, what I try to coach people on is to not get out of their field of expertise. So I just finished a deal this week with an individual, and she has an outsourced HR firm. Well, through her HR firm, she realized that there was a lot of her clients were having problems with near the Family Medical Leave Act. And so she's developed a software as a service package that she's been selling a 3-ring notebook to these clients. Well, she's got a built-in client base. It's close to what her expertise is. That makes an easy decision as to, yeah, go out and do that. That's your passion. You've got a business all wrapped around that. I think a lot of times, where I get cautious with an individual is when they want to launch something that's just so completely, opposite of who they are as an individual or their experience or life experiences. So, stay close to your knitting. Do what you're good at. Do what you're kind of born here to do anyway. Stand a lot better chance of succeeding.
Yeah, where were you about 3 years ago when I was trying to start a tech business? We were talking about this backstage. I have no business doing anything in tech, and we lost a lot of money, made a lot of early mistakes, fell in love with the idea, and then we've got in front of real customers, and they said, "Well, can you make it do this?" And we said, "Sure," but we didn't know how to do that. We didn't have the money to do that, and it was a painful experience. But so maybe to some of the others that. So Brad, I know you've got, Jason, you've got a company that you're working on as well. So what was it when you decided, okay, I'm going to continue with this?
I think it goes back to the customer discovery process and the feedback that you get from, the market that you're trying to work within or sell within, and really listening and to Brad's point earlier on getting that feedback, even if it's negative, the feedback, positive or negative, is your gold, right? Because the compilation of positive and negative is that guidepost out there for you to figure out, am I getting, 6, 7 out of 10 that are positive and guiding me in a good direction and a good next step forward? Or is it the opposite and it's a lot of negative and, I'm a good salesman and so I'm kind of beating over the head the 2 or 3 that are saying yes, but they're reluctantly saying yes and, this isn't going well. So I think it goes back to metrics. There's, email is a simple way to start if you're doing something on the consumer side, and you can measure open rates, click-through rates, and traffic, and seeing how people are signing up for a newsletter. I mean, that's really where I started. And so comparing, industry averages and looking at where you might stand in the pile helps.
Yeah, one of the around that, these are great ideas. One of the things just to keep in mind is there's not kind of a go no go. We're not like firing a rocket to Mars here. There's like you're thinking about doing this, and so there's steps. Peter Drucker, you heard of that guy? Okay, he said he said many smart things. One of the smart things he said was, listen, out of all the decisions that you're going to make, there's 10% of them that are right, and everybody knows that, and there are 10% of them that are wrong, and everybody knows that. In the middle, it's either mostly wrong or mostly right. And so what you're looking for is move up the mostly right part. So when I send somebody out to do a piece of homework on this little concept test, I say, okay, go talk to 10 customers. Before you come back and talk to me again, I want you to talk to 10. But basically, you're not a go until you got 8 out of 10 said they want this thing. Because all those aren't going to act on it anyway. So until you get that, keep working on your pitch or your experience and say, well, what would you change about this experience until you get 8 out of 10 who are saying yes. What you've done is you've moved progressively up the mostly right. And there's a point where you get up there where you make a decision, okay, I'm go. But go doesn't mean I'm going to go get $1 million worth of investment. Okay? It says I'm going to do this next thing that moves the needle ahead and next thing that moves the needle ahead. Hopefully you've moved it pretty close up to the idea of the way up mostly right, the 80% up to the 90%. By the time you're out talking to somebody about getting some money, you've now got some evidence. You've also developed and vetted your idea. So it's a process. It's not a yes, no, go, and you're trying to get as close to mostly right or close to right as you can. It usually means mostly right, somewhere on that scale. And if it's kind of in the middle, you're going to fail. Okay? And even if it's 70% mostly right, you're going to fail. Okay? So keep working on it until you figure out, at least at the talking level or the early MVP level, people really like this.
And I don't know if there's any of the current accelerator folks in the room. Some of them were here earlier. They'll be the first to tell you how quickly it is to move through that scale, because we're on week 5 or 6, I think. Mm-hmm. But they all, out of 15 teams going through accelerators at the EC right now, I'd say 7 or 8 of them have made significant changes, but they've all made changes as they've been talking to customers and moving through that process of trying to move up the better side of the scale and closer to what would be defined as success.
Well, good. So part of getting to success is realizing entrepreneurship is a journey. It can be really difficult. It can be very, very time consuming. So part of what the books out today are some of your daily habits. So what is it that you all do, or your daily habits that, all right, maybe we're putting people on the spot. I can start with Millie if you guys want to think about it. But what are some of the daily habits that allow you to be successful, or maybe allow you to decompress? So it can be tough out there. So we have the
Get a dog.
Get a dog. Get a dog. So daily habits for success that you all do your best to follow.
Well, I've had the privilege of working with dozens and dozens of founders over the last 6.5 years, and one thing that we found really helps at Launch Tennessee with some of the companies we work with closely is helping them implement the Rockefeller habits. And that kind of goes back to my comments about distraction. Rockefeller habits is certainly created by someone much smarter than myself, but it's an execution strategy to help keep you focused on what's important and what you need to drive to. And it is daily, weekly, monthly, 30-day, and quarterly. So you set 90-day rocks in anywhere from 3 to 5 really key initiatives for the entity that you want to hit in 90 days that you know will move the needle in a really significant way. And then you literally roll back into weekly goals. And we at our team will have a daily huddle at 8:42, and it's roughly 7 minutes long for each team member to understand who's working on what. And all of those tasks roll up into a weekly, then monthly system of goals. And so that helps remove distraction. You can, of course, edit along the way if things happen, if market conditions change or your technology changes, financing changes, you can change them. But it's a system that helps keep you focused and organized.
Yeah, so me, I've kind of transitioned a little bit the older that I've gotten, so I'm not really necessarily doing a lot of my own ventures anymore. So I'm involved with a lot of other people's ventures and providing input there. So for that, to me, I need a good amount of time to make sure that I'm charged, I'm thinking right. So a couple years ago, we bought some property and moved out into the country. So Heather's got her dog. I got 22 chickens.
There you go.
But anyway, so her, yeah, and that lady who had the cat that goes to the bathroom on
Yeah.
the toilet, we teach chickens that, I'm in.
Okay, well, good. So we've got everything from Rockefeller habits
That's right.
to a listening dog to asking really great questions. So thank you to Jason Denenberg, Brad Edmondson, Dr. David First, Heather McBee, and Millie.
Thanks for having us.
Blake, it's so fantastic. It's just like the Oscars. They just start turning the music on, mate. Did you notice that? How fantastic was this group? A round of applause again.